Okay, I want to honor everyone's time, so we're going to go ahead and get started here today. My name is Carrie Wardle. I'm the Education Manager at Idaho Public Television. Thanks for coming to our Novate Professional Development Series. I'm going to also introduce or let her introduce herself. I have somebody else on here with me. So Ashley, do you want to take a minute and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Ashley Mortz. I'm one of the education specialists at Idaho Public Television, so I do community outreach around the Boise up to Ontario area.
Awesome. We're excited to have you here and to join us. We have some great speakers. I'm going to tell the panelists that we will make you panelists during the break, so don't be nervous yet that you don't have access. Thanks again for joining us. We're really excited to be able to offer this professional development series to teachers across the state. And so tonight we're going to do a couple of things. I'll do some housekeeping stuff. I'll talk to you about the professional development credit. And then we're going to watch the documentary, the Nick Sick documentary that was produced by Idaho Public Television last year. Then we'll take a quick break, and then we have some really great panelists and speakers that we would love to have share some information with you. Please utilize during their session the Q&A, and we'll make sure that your questions get answered if you have any. So let me start out with probably some important information for a lot of you. This professional development series is available for credit through three universities: University of Idaho, Idaho State University, and Boise State University. So it is available for one professional development credit. You will need to register for whichever university you would like to take the credit through. We'll send, I'm going to keep working on figuring out if I can enable the chat because I'm being told I can. But if I can't, either way, we're going to send a follow-up email to all participants after this webinar, and it'll come tomorrow, and it will have all of the critical links that you need. If you do want to take this course for professional development credit, you will need to go to whichever website link we send you for your respective university, register and for the credit through them, and then we will send you, it'll notify us that you've registered. Excuse me. We'll send you a link to get into Google Classroom. We'll be facilitating this course through Google Classroom. It's the easiest place for us to keep track of everything. So you will have to submit some additional work outside of just watching the webinars, because as you probably know, your professional development credit has to be 15 hours, and watching 3 webinars is not 15 hours. So everything that you need to complete this course for professional development credit will be in the Google Classroom. Ashley will be helping with that. So Ashley and I both will be sort of facilitating that. So you'll see emails from either one or both of us. And so we will share that information with you, as I said, afterwards. The deadline to register, and again, all of this will be in an email. The deadline to register right now is set for January 31st. However, I like to be as flexible as possible. So if you need more time to get registered, please do let me know. I think most of the universities are pretty good about extending that deadline if I need them to. So please let me know via an email, which you will have tomorrow morning. So I wanted to make sure that we talked about the credit. Please do also know that we are recording all of these webinars. So as I said at the beginning, it's a 3-part series. We'll be doing one webinar today, obviously, right now, one in February and one in March. They're always on the 4th Wednesday at the same time, 5:30 Mountain, 4:30 Pacific. If you're unable to attend one of them, we will record them, so you can still register for credit, even if you can't attend them all live. We'll put the recordings in the Google Classroom for you so that you have access to those. So you don't have to be able to attend them all live. Let me just make sure that I am covering everything. Okay, I think if you have any questions about professional development credit or requirements for that, please don't hesitate to put them in the question and answer. And Ashley or I can pop in and answer those. Right now, what we're gonna do is watch the Nick Sick documentary. If you are not aware, we got asked to produce a documentary last year on the dangers of vaping, and we really were asked to kind of target teens and tweens. We actually spent last year targeting mostly parents. This year we're doing some separate campaigns on social where we are specifically targeting teens and tweens. They're a lot of fun. But we produced, Jenny Sue Weltner produced a really great documentary that has been viewed actually in other states, even across the country. We'll take a little break, and then we have some really great healthcare professionals here. This webinar is really more informational. We hope to help you understand the danger of vaping and the fact that Idaho is not immune to the vaping crisis that is going on. The second webinar, we'll be looking ahead, and we'll be talking actually to students and parents who either have quit, students who have quit vaping, or who are trying to quit vaping, and we'll get some really hands-on, like what they wish their teachers had done or what their teachers can do to help them. And then the third one is going to be chock full of resources for you to help your students. So I hope that you'll find all of this content really useful. Okay, welcome back. I hope we have everybody back. You should see some panelists here who I hope will be able to turn on their cameras. And I'm going to introduce to you our panelists, and then I'll let them share their information with us. Please feel free. We will have some time at the end for question and answer. So please feel free to drop those questions in the chat. We'll be monitoring it as we go, and we'll make sure that the speakers get those answered if, after everybody's gone. So please do feel free to ask them your questions. So let me just introduce you to the speakers. We'll first hear from Ronnie Harker. He, during his 3.5 years as an exercise physiologist and manager of the cardiac rehab unit at Madison Memorial Hospital, Ronnie Harker developed a special interest in cardiopulmonary patients. This led him to gain additional training in respiratory therapy, after which he worked as a respiratory therapist in various areas of the hospital, including the emergency department, med-surg, the ICU, and the NICU. Finding that he particularly loved working with newborns, Ronnie pursued and received the neonatal and pediatric specialist certification in support of his work in the NICU. He also became certified as a sleep disorder specialist to bolster his efforts in the hospital sleep lab. Currently, as Madison Health's cardiopulmonology diagnostic specialist, that's a mouthful, Ronnie performs pulmonary function testing, stress testing, and heart monitoring. He's fully qualified for this role, having gotten certified as a pulmonary function technologist as well. So he will be sharing his experiences with us first. Then we'll hear from Dr. Benjamin Tippett. He's a pediatric pulmonologist at St. Luke's Children's Hospital in Boise. He specializes in caring for children with lung diseases, including asthma, cystic fibrosis, recurrent pneumonia, and technology-dependent children with lung diseases. He completed his schooling and training in Idaho, Utah, California, Texas, and Wisconsin. He's provided education and training regarding the dangers of vaping and tobacco to several schools and youth groups in the Boise area. He lives in Meridian with his wife and 4 children and enjoys gardening, raising cattle, skiing, and wake surfing. And Dr. Tippett, Ashley and I decided after reading your bio that we probably needed better hobbies. So that was, those are awesome. And then finally, we have Officer David Gomez. Officer Gomez, with over 13 years in law enforcement, primarily serves as a school resource officer near Boise, Idaho. focusing on school safety and digital awareness education. He has dedicated 10 years to enhancing school safety environments. His expertise includes understanding the challenges in educational settings, educating on digital media's impact on youth, collaborating with the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force to combat online predators, and informing about drug dangers and social media's role in glamorizing drug use. Committed to community safety and education, Gomez plays a vital role in protecting and educating the younger generation about digital and social challenges. So we're excited to hear from these experts in the field, and let's turn it over to Ronnie.
Okay, perfect. Let's see, do you guys have any feedback with this? There, how's that? That better? Okay, perfect. Well, thanks for the introduction, Terry. Well, I know those were kind of a mouthful, so good job. Okay, so yeah, so I'm a respiratory therapist over here at Madison in Rexburg, Idaho. Some stories that I got is I kind of had a few different experiences here with vaping and stuff with youth. So I think one of the most memorable ones I've had was when I was back still working in ER. I had a patient, this was a case that I was a part of, where we had a kid who basically, I think he was just barely graduated high school. He came into the ER, it was about 11 o'clock at night. He comes in and he was just freaking out, anxious, jittery, all this weird stuff going on. So we kind of asked him, we're like, dude, did you take anything? Is anything going on? But one of the things that I found over here in this area, or Matt, one of the hardest things is getting these kids to admit that they are like vaping or something. They're scared that they're going to get in trouble. They're scared that something's going to happen. And so this kid, we kept telling him, was like, dude, what's going on? You taking something? Did you do something? And he wouldn't tell me. As I'm sitting there doing his EKG, the nurses working with him. They would tell us, I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to get in trouble. He won't tell us what's going on. Well, we finally were able to convince him, like, dude, you're not going to get in trouble. You're not going to get in trouble. Just talk to us here. We got to know what happened for us to be able to help you. Right. So he goes and tells us that what he was doing is he called it a vaping party, is what he went to, where it sounds like there was 10 or 12 individuals. They all got together and they were all vaping different things. And his thing was he was vaping marijuana juice. That's what he was vaping. But it was like the marijuana, that didn't really make sense with his symptoms and kind of what was going on because of how anxious and how jittery and crazy he was. But we're like, anything else, or was it just the marijuana? He's like, oh, just the marijuana. We're like, okay. Well, we went ahead and they tested him for pretty much everything you could think of, and they came back positive for cocaine as well. And so keep hearing these stories about, how the marijuana is getting laced with other things. That's the only thing we can think of because he wouldn't admit to actually snorting or taking cocaine or anything like that. But the only thing that we could think of is that the marijuana that he was vaping was laced with cocaine, something like that. That one was kind of a crazy experience that we had with him. We finally got him doing good. He was okay. But so I kind of work on the pulmonary function side now, right? I've been doing that for the last couple of years. And so with pulmonary function testing, it's kind of interesting to where you can, actually be able to see what's going on with their lung function when you're doing this kind of stuff, right? And with my area over here, I do get a decent amount of high school age, mainly seniors, but every now and then I do get some younger kids. And if I get them, and like I said, it's hard to get them to admit that they're vaping or something, but every now and then I can get them to admit to me. And I've kind of noticed some interesting trends with the pulmonary function testing, especially with the fact I've noticed, especially after COVID, I've been seeing a lot more asthma, reactive airway type stuff. And these kids are always coming in basically for a chronic cough or shortness of breath, or they're not able to participate in the same sports and activities as their peers. You know, it's kind of what we're doing the testing for. And it's kind of one of those things where it's like, it's interesting kind of seeing what kind of trends. I do definitely see a lot of like asthma, reactive airway type stuff on the pulmonary function testing. And so if they're vaping, it's gonna kind of just keep that cycle going where it's almost like they're almost in this like asthma type state, and it's just kind of aggravating them all the time. And so that's something that's been really interesting. But I remember one case in particular that really stuck out to me once. Is I had this girl about 15 years old. And the trick with this is she wouldn't tell me that she was vaping. She wouldn't tell me, but she was wearing this jacket. And you can see down in the sleeve over here, she had this little hard looking device right here in her sleeve. And she'd always sit there, she was fidgeting with her sleeve the whole time. And it looked like some kind of pen or something in there. And when I was going through her pulmonary function testing, there's this one measurement that we have called a DLCO, where it's a carbon monoxide diffusion capacity test, where what you're looking at is you're trying to see like basically how well the lungs are absorbing different gases and oxygen and things like that. And her DLCO measurements was really low in compared to a normal individual. And that was something that really stuck out to me really weird because like she's 15 years old. Why is this happening? You know? And so that was one that really kind of stuck out to me quite a bit was that case that I had with her. Like I said, she wouldn't admit to anything. And so still to this day, I don't know what was going on or if she was exposed to something that might have caused that. But she was always fidgeting with her sleeve there. So I always felt like maybe she had something in there. But the tricky part is I don't really always have a lot of high school and junior high kids that always come in. I do every now and then, but the biggest population that I see with the younger ones is actually the college. Over here, now BYU Idaho just right over here. So I get a lot of college age students, and the weird thing is I've had quite a few that they kind of come over and with their pulmonary function tested, it almost looks like they're at the beginning stages of emphysema. I've had quite a few coming in where we've seen that kind of stuff, and that's really concerning. And I've had some that definitely they admit to it. Usually when they're in college and they're away from their family, you can kind of get them to admit to things a little bit more and actually talk to you, be more open about it. And so I've had a few that have been more open about it. I've seen some of those kind of characteristics and stuff on the pulmonary function testing. I had one guy in particular, he was trying to get into the military. And those kids are smart. They won't tell you a stinking thing because they're afraid that, you know, military, if they see that they've smoked marijuana or vape or done something, that they're not going to let them into the military. You know, they won't admit anything. But I had one kid in particular, his pulmonary function test was awful. And so I feel like he had to have been doing something. Of course, it wouldn't tell me, but definitely seen some interesting things. A lot of asthma type stuff, reactive airway stuff. So with the vaping and stuff, I've caught a few that while we're going through, I can kind of start, kind of asking some questions about, well, do you know anyone who's vapes? Are I've been around this kind of stuff. Oh yeah, I know, and yeah, I've tried it. I'm like, okay, I caught you. Let's talk here, that kind of thing. So then we start talking, and they'll be a little bit more open with me about it. So that's kind of the typical stuff that I usually see. Like I said, the ER case, that was kind of one that really stuck out to me a lot. And then I've had a few cases with pulmonary function testing that really kind of stuck out to me as far as like seeing their lung function diminishing at such a young age. Because some of those characteristics you wouldn't see in people unless they're typically like 40, 50, 60 that are smoking or something. It's like they're usually older, and I'm starting to see it at younger ages, especially the smaller airways. That's definitely been kind of a interesting side too. So, yeah, those are some of the cases I've seen. I mean, what kind of questions you guys got for me here? Maybe I can answer for you. I guess while we're waiting there, I do remember another case that I heard of that there was a kid around the area that he ended up hospitalized from a vaping injury and was intubated, and they had a really hard time getting him off the ventilator. And this kid ended up having to be trached, so they ended up having to put a trach in his airway. I haven't heard how he's doing, but we did have a case like that. That was at a local facility. That wasn't here personally, but I did hear about that one from a colleague. And every now and then, you always kind of hear those cases of kids that are vaping like marijuana that's laced with fentanyl. I've heard of those cases quite a few times. So just all over, and it's kind of a crappy situation. You know, it's kind of hard to get that through to some of these kids and get them to realize kind of what's going on, because it doesn't really seem like they like to listen to you. You know, they don't like to listen. They just kind of they think they're invincible, right? When a teenager, they're healthy, everything's fine, and then we start doing some testing and see some stuff here like, dude, this isn't good, you know. But they just don't like to listen. That's kind of been one of my biggest struggles on my side is one, getting them to admit to me what's going on. Two, getting them to realize what they're actually doing with how young they are. One of the things that I've always liked to talk to them about is, you know, not just the lung health side, but it's like there's always kind of the cardiac side too, right? The thing that I've always kind of told some of my patients, I'm like, think about it this way. The heart and the lungs are very closely tight knitted together. They work together. So whatever affects the heart can affect the lungs and vice versa. You know, it's kind of can go back and forth that way sometimes. And so sometimes if I bring the heart side into it, then it kind of freaks them out a little bit, and then they might actually open up to you. I've had that happen a few times because I keep getting younger individuals that I've been having to put heart monitoring, different things like palpitations. They're getting palpitations and stuff. I've also had younger individuals that we've been having to do stress testing on and seeing abnormal stress testing, and they can kind of keep coming in at younger ages. That's something that's been interesting to see. I'm kind of curious as to what kind of research is going to come out here soon as to far as the cardiac side of things. I don't know if Dr. Tippett might have some info on that. That's been kind of an interesting thing. Let's see. Doctor. A little confused by that question. Any recommendations as a doctor on educating? Rural resource officer. So, well, one, I'm not a doctor. I'm a respiratory therapist. But kind of what I've found on my side is it's kind of tricky. You know, it's one of those things where we can always pound the scare tactics into these kids and stuff, but it doesn't seem like that's always going to get to them. So one of the things that I found that sometimes gets through to these kids is one, talking to them about what the root of why they started vaping is. You know, it's like you always kind of get these kids that, oh, it's an image thing, I wanted to be popular. But, you know, what we're finding a lot that you guys saw in the video is like stress kind of seems to be a very big component here. And so what I've done is while I'm working with these patients, if I have the time, I like to sit down to them and kind of talk to them about, you know, the proper coping mechanisms as for their stress, making sure that they have ideas as to good, healthy coping skills, and maybe turning to sports or physical activity or being out with their friends, you know, having good resources that way rather than turning to the vaping and the other stuff like that for their coping with their stress. That's kind of one of the things that I've gotten that seems to get through to these kids a decent amount is if you're open with them and honest with them and talk with them about it, they sometimes kind of see a little bit more open to listening to you about these other advice and mechanisms and coping mechanisms that we talk with them about. So I guess being open, being real with them.
I think that's great, Ronnie. We, in fact, in the next webinar series, we'll talk about some of the connection between mental health and vaping. And again, all of this is so early. There just isn't, it's not like tobacco and smoking where we have years of research, but we are seeing connections now between mental health and vaping. And like you said, multiple kids in that documentary mentioned when they were stressed out, when they were having a hard time, that's when they started vaping. So maybe it's, you know, to the question that she asked about educating kids about not vaping, certainly they need to be educated, but maybe it's also figuring out how we help them cope with stress and mental health issues and not turn to that. So I love that that connection that you made there. Let's stick around if you would, Ronnie, in case there's other questions, but let's go ahead and hear now from Dr. Tippett. And we'd love to hear, you know, as a pediatrician, kind of what some of your experiences have been.
Sure. Carrie, thanks for inviting me on. I really appreciate this. It's been an interesting experience to learn more about vaping. So my name is Ben Tippett. I'm a pediatric pulmonologist in Boise, Idaho. I've been here since 2010, and I really feel like I've been able to see the evolution of vaping throughout my short career here. As a physician, some of this was brought out in the presentation earlier, but there's really 4 things that I'm really concerned about with vaping. And those 4 things would be, the first one is, I don't think anyone really knows what's in vape juice. It's always interesting what people know and what they don't know. The second thing is just the amount of nicotine that's in vape juice and how addictive nicotine really is and what it really does to your body. The third thing is really just the health issues that go along with vaping, and the potential health issues that can happen with that. And then finally, just how vaping is often a gateway to other drugs and other harmful substances. So as I talk to kids about vaping, I'm always surprised, well, kids and adults, because I ask everyone about vape exposure. It's always interesting to me to see who knows what vaping is and what it isn't. I often get told, well, it's just water vapor. What's the big deal? And in fact, it's not water vapor at all. As was discussed previously, the substance that it's dissolved in is the vegetable glycerin and propylene glycol, which is, we have lots of experience with those two substances, and it's often in like sweet things like ice cream and tobacco, or not tobacco, coffee-based drinks. And we know you can digest it really well, but we have no idea what it does to the inside of the lung. And knowing that the vaping really started in 2009 and is really taken off in the 2015 to 2016 time period, we just don't have enough experience to be able to say, is it safe or is it not? Because your lung is really not set up to handle things that your stomach is able to handle. The other thing we know is that there's almost every vape juice has nicotine in it, whether they say it does or it doesn't. It almost all has nicotine in it. And in addition to nicotine, there's lots of other chemicals. We talk about heavy metals. We talk about diacetyl. There's just so many chemicals within that juice that people just don't know what they are. As I think about nicotine, it's so addictive, and we've had so many kids come into the hospital with a lung-related injury that were addicted to nicotine at age 16 that we had to intervene because of their nicotine addiction while they were in the hospital. But as I've done the research about vaping and nicotine, what I found is that a pack of cigarettes has about 20 cigarettes in it, and there's about 1 milligram of nicotine, 1 to 1.2 milligrams of nicotine in each cigarette. So you get about 20 milligrams of nicotine in a pack of cigarettes. I'm always surprised that people don't know how much nicotine is actually in vape juice. If you look at the side of the box, it's cleverly disguised on how much nicotine is there. It'll say it'll often say like a 3 milligram or a 50 milligram or a 1.2% or a 5%. And what that really means is for example, 50 milligram means that there's 50 milligrams per milliliter of nicotine. I was looking up just a website about vape juice, and I came across one that was called Tyson 2.0 Heavyweight. And it said it was a 5% on the box. And obviously this is produced by a famous boxer from decades ago. But what that really means, that 5% means that there's 50 milligrams in every milliliter of vape juice. And it advertised that you can get 7,000 puffs out of this disposable vape cartridge. And if you do the math with all that, with every 100 puffs of vaping, you get the nicotine equivalent of 2 to 2.5 packs of cigarettes. So in that one device, it's 7,000 puffs, you get the equivalent of 140 packs of cigarettes. And it's about 70 milliliters or about 6 tablespoons of fluid within that device. And you can buy it for $22 and they'll ship it to your front door. And if you go down to the local convenience store and you try to buy 140 packs of Marlboros for the same amount of nicotine, that costs $980. So the availability of nicotine is such, it's so different than generations in past, that it's so easy to get a ginormous amount of nicotine. And these kids are absolutely addicted to nicotine. And it's a very real thing. And we know that nicotine is not a benign substance. And I am very concerned about this generation that vapes so much and get exposed to so much nicotine and the long-term consequences of it. Now, vaping originally was designed as a smoking cessation device. One of the original vape devices was called the Juul, and it was a little pod that you vaped in this little device. And if you go to their website today, it'll say that it's designed to eliminate cigarette use. But what we found is that the majority of individuals who try to use vaping as a smoking cessation device are unsuccessful. In fact, they estimate that 82% of individuals who tried to discontinue cigarette smoking by vaping are unsuccessful. And then those that actually are successful, 80% of those continue to vape. And they probably get more nicotine out of their vape juice than they do out of actual cigarettes. So someone once said that while e-cigarettes may be a potential off-ramp for adult smokers, they've proven to be a heavily traveled on-ramp for nicotine addiction among youth. And we know that's true. It's just so incredibly addicting. And we know that it's a gateway to other drugs and much more addictive and damaging drugs than nicotine. As Ronnie was talking about, we keep finding that they're laced with something else, and they just don't really know. So as a physician, I see kids who come in the hospital with a vape-related lung injury, and we've had many of these. It really started in the summer of 2019. That seemed to be when it really started to take off. And there's been thousands of cases across the country, and I don't know exactly how many deaths by 2020. In that first year, there were at least 70 deaths from we call it electronic cigarette or vaping product use associated lung injury. It's EVALI or EVALI or EVALI is what we call it. And what it really does, it's a form of acute lung injury. And it causes destruction of the lung tissue itself. Now, what we found is that the majority of individuals who have a vape-related lung injury is usually because they're vaping THC or vitamin E oil. And vitamin E oil is usually what they dissolve the THC in. And we know that vitamin or any oil, your lung is just not set up to handle oil. You can get what's called the lipoid pneumonia, but it can't digest that oil, so it continues to build up in your lungs until it actually damages the lung itself. And what I found is that most of these individuals don't know exactly where their vape juice came from. So they get it off the back of a truck in some dark alley somewhere, or from a family member or a friend. And recently there's been a new, kids are very smart, and vape companies are very smart also, but kids have started making their own vape juice, and then they put it inside their pod. And and who knows what's actually in it. And there's been a number of cases that have happened where they get lung injuries from some homemade juice that they've made for themselves. There's a couple other ways that they can get a high concentration of these products. It's called dripping or dabbing. It's called a dab wax, and what it is, it's a very high concentration of THC and nicotine that they make into a wax-like substance, and then it's heated and it's smoked in like a vape device or a pipe. And it can be incredibly damaging to the lung. The lung is just not set up to handle these types of chemicals and oils. Now, when I have seen children in the hospital, usually teenagers with vape-related injury, it's really a diagnosis of exclusion. They come in and they've got shortness of breath and cough, and their oxygen saturation level is low and their carbon dioxide levels are high. And we try to rule out everything else. But then once we can rule out everything else, then we get down to what Ronnie was talking about, is just that exposure to those the vape juice and whatever else that they're vaping. And it can be a really challenging diagnosis to make. But the one thing that we are most concerned about is something they call popcorn lung, and that is everybody that vapes knows about popcorn lung, at least the word popcorn lung, because they've been told about it. And really what it is popcorn lung is the fancy name for it is bronchiolitis obliterans, which is where you get destruction of the very smallest part of the lung. And it started because individuals that worked in popcorn factories that they were making microwave popcorn were getting this bronchiolitis obliterans, and they found it was from the flavor additive that was added to the microwave popcorn. And the same flavor additive is added to vape juice also. And what it does to your lung is it destroys the very smallest part of the lung and causes permanent scarring in that area. And there's really no treatment to that. And I have seen a couple of cases of bronchiolitis obliterans in our children's hospital because of vape-related injury. And once it happens, there's no going back because there's no way to treat it. It's just supportive. So as to talk about the what can we do about this? I really think education is key. When I have seen children in the hospital who have been diagnosed with a vape-related injury and we start talking about vaping, they're always surprised about what it really is because very few people know. As I've gone and talked to, I gave a lecture to some school teachers, school nurses at a conference. They were just astounded at what vaping really is and how damaging it can really be. So I really think that education is the key. I have a few teenagers at my house and they don't listen to me very often. But I really do believe that education is the key because there's really no other way to stop this. So I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has any, and I'll stay on the line until we're done. And thank you again. I appreciate it.
Dr. Tippett, thank you. Gosh, those were some staggering statistics that you shared about kids. And I think what is also critical to point out with all of these experiences is that they're happening right here in Idaho. Sometimes I think we think Idaho's immune or it's not happening here, right? But it's happening. We're seeing these things in Idaho, in small communities and big communities, everywhere. I think it's staggering statistics. I'm a mom of a 10-year-old, so I've already been, since this documentary came out, we've been talking about it. He's probably getting tired of hearing it, but because yeah, it's quite an issue. Thank you so much for sharing that, Dr. Tippett. Okay, last but for sure not least, Officer Gomez is, as we said earlier, a school resource officer. So I'm really excited to hear from kind of a school perspective as well, what information he has to share with us. So Officer Gomez, go ahead.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. I'm Officer Gomez / Deputy Gomez. I'm currently a school resource officer in Idaho City, which is right outside of Boise. but I did 10 years with Meridian Police. I did 2 years as a school resource officer in middle school, Lewis and Clark Middle, 5 years at Mountain View High School, which is 2,300 high school students. So I got an education in all things kids. I've been confiscating vapes from kids from 2013. When I left Mountain View in 2019, myself and the SRO from Rocky would bet every semester how many vapes we could get. And we were getting about 100 a semester. Okay, that's a lot of vapes. And right now in Idaho City, more than half of my students are vaping. More than half, easily more than half. And when I go teach around the country, I talk to schools about what's going on. And if they don't have high numbers, it's because they're not looking. Everybody around the whole country is dealing with vapes, dealing with THC vapes, dealing with dabs, dealing with drippers, dealing with all these things. Now, the current record holder for getting citations from me at a school is a 6th grader. Okay, and so he started in 5th grade. He got 1 citation as a 5th grader, and then he's got like 7 6th grade tickets for vaping. Most of them he's getting from his parents. If you're a parent and you smoke and or vape, I don't know how you're going to tell your kid not to, right? Everything is gone. Now, these kids are spending so much time on social media that is making everything look cool, right? All the smoking tricks, all the vaping tricks, all those things are looking cool. And they're getting this information 9 hours a day, a lot of kids that are spending on social media, right? So if you're a parent, you want to get your kid not to vape, control their social media, control their screen time. I mean, those are just a few things, but this is going to be a parent situation, right? I always tell everybody, it's like, how many problems has the government actually solved, right? Especially with your kids at home, it's got to be a parent issue. Kids are so addicted to vaping. Well, let's do some show and tell first, real quick. I brought some show and tell. So let's see. This is one of the most popular vapes right now. It is a 50 milligram, which is 5%. And the kids always say, hey, 5%, that means it's 95% free. No, 5% is the most you can get, right? If you moved into like a 7.5%, you could be deadly as far as the nicotine content, right? It was used in pesticides a long time ago. It's still deadly. But these things, a long time ago, they said you couldn't have flavored, right? You couldn't market flavored vapes to kids. They put in the wording flavored refillable. Well, so what they did is they made these disposable. You can't refill them, so they can make all the flavors for kids that they want. Now, this one is about the size of a Juul. You don't see Juuls anymore. But what this one has, it has marijuana. You can see it shows the marijuana on there. A lot of them don't show the marijuana. I have little swabs now that I can test for marijuana. About half the vapes I'm getting are marijuana vapes. But the addiction really happens in the nicotine. The marijuana vapes, they can take or leave, do it as they please, and they do plenty of it. But the nicotine is what really addicts them so much that the kids cannot make it through a class without vaping. And so what they do is they take this size vape, they put it in their sleeve, and usually a hoodie, and they'll smoke it, and then they'll blow it into their shirt. And a teacher might smell something like a Scentsy smell, but then you can't, there's going to be 6 kids to choose from. Which kid are you going to choose? And if you choose wrong, you're going to have Mama Bear come and asking why you're accusing their kid of vaping, right? And in reality, no matter which kid you accuse, your odds are more that they are vaping than that they aren't. And there's no race, there's no basically financial background. Every kid is vaping because we're marketing them like this. And as soon as you get some nicotine and you get hooked on that, you can't get unhooked. Now, I have kids that come to me at Mountain View and here in Idaho City that their vape broke or something for the day, and they come into my office and they say, Gomez, I know you have a drawer full of confiscated vapes. I broke mine. If I don't get a vape hit in the next 15 minutes, my head's going to explode. Give me a ticket. I don't care what you do. Let me have a vape hit or I'm going to die right here on the spot. And that's how they feel. That's how addicted they are. Now, of the kids that I'm busting with it, it's actually a $74 citation. Nothing, right? They don't care. They get some in-school suspension. I talk to them in in-school suspension. Get to know them. I usually know all the kids anyways, but let's talk about their addiction and quitting. And usually when I say, hey, are you going to quit? And they're like, why, right? $74 is nothing. And there's no reason for them to quit. Why would they quit? That's where we need to come up with some better reasons for them to quit, because at this point, they have no good reasons to quit. The other thing that happens is, during the video, they said there was the 3 addictions. You have the chemical addiction, the device addiction, and I can't remember what the third one is, but I have a fourth one, which is the social addiction. So as a parent, you catch your kid with a vape and you tell them, hey, you're not going to vape anymore. Number one, you're going to battle a super strong nicotine addiction. But number two, you're going to have to get rid of all their friends, because once kids start vaping, all their friends are going to vape. And once they start doing that, that's their Friday and Saturday nights are going to be all about vaping, who can get vapes from where. So super tough. Try and sell your kid on not having any more friends and quitting the vape addiction at the same time. It's going to be a tough battle, right? So I mean, this is a battle best fought beforehand. Now, I will tell you that, you know, when I first started being an SRO, alcohol was a misdemeanor crime. Then they changed it to an infraction, which is what vaping is. But the alcohol infraction is $487.50, right? That makes an impact on a family. That makes an impact on a kid. $74 at a vape ticket, they do not care. It's like, yeah, I'll do that this week and I'll do it next week and I'll do it the next week. And there's no increase. You just keep on getting $74 citations. But you do $487.50. So anybody who's going to do legislation, $487.50, that'll change hearts and minds. Let's see. Vape detection at the schools. So we do a lot with vape detection. And so we have vape sensors in our bathrooms. When the vape sensors go off, and they're pretty good, they go off, we look at video, we can see who's coming and going, and we're never surprised by who it is, because it's most of our kids. So then we take them to the office. We check their pockets. Of course, it's not in their pockets, because whoever is doing it knows they can throw these in their underwear and they throw it in their bra, and we're not going to search that, right? Any SROs out there, don't search for vapes, right? The only reason to ever search a kid like that, they got a bomb, and then you can go in their underwear. But other than that, don't. We got the wand hand detectors that they have at the airport. Cost like $130. You can wand kids and you can find where the vapes are right away. Now, all of a sudden, every girl has an underwire bra, which isn't true, but they all have underwire bras, which is what making our sensors go off. No, and then we call parents to come in and search them. And a lot of parents like, well, I'm too busy. You know, I just don't want to come in. So a lot of parents are the same way. They don't know why their kid shouldn't vape. Right? But this takes over their lives. I tell them it's similar to marijuana. It's similar to cell phone addiction, right? So I see sixth graders without a cell phone who are bringing their guitar out every day. As soon as they get a cell phone, that guitar's gone. As soon as they get vaping, that guitar's gone. As soon as they start smoking marijuana, that guitar's gone. Their art is gone. Everything starts disappearing because their whole life and their whole character starts becoming about vaping. So then the problem we have later on is that social media teaches kids to be worth their body parts. So now you have a whole generation of middle schoolers who's addicted to vaping, and they don't have that much money. So how do they get more vapes? Well, they trade nude photos for it. Okay, and so we have tons of kids that trade nude photos, not only of themselves, but now the boys, they collect nude photos of girls and will trade them for vapes. Now, I'm going to actually share a link, and I think you have to share it after I do it. But it was one of my last cases when I was a Meridian officer, and it's a 13-year-old girl who actually traded a vape for sex. And it doesn't say the vape in there, but that was my case. You can see twice registered sex offender came to a girl's house at 3 in the morning and she wanted a vape. So he traded her sex for a vape. That was it, straight across. And he tried to do it twice. The second time, it was actually me on the other end of the line. So he got surprised. He got a vape plus. However, this is happening all day long in schools. Kids are trading their body parts for money. They're trading it for vapes. They're trading it for phones, right? And so we have a lot of things going on at once. Vapes is one of the big things. Now, I'm also getting recruiters that call me, hey, Gomez, I need some summertime workers, but I don't want anybody that vapes because they are useless, because they have to vape every 20 minutes, no matter what, so they cannot stay on task. I've been flying around a lot, and I can tell you almost every flight I'm on now, somebody's vaping. I can smell where the vape is, but I don't know exactly who's got it, and nobody else does either. But people cannot go more than 20, 30 minutes without their vape. And I've never seen a 0 milligram vape in vape juice, especially with the kids. Now, I know the doctor talked about kids making their own. Kids have been making their own for a long time, especially when they had the bigger vapes. I had a story where the kid actually put a couple of drops of gasoline in the vape juice. And so the 6 kids that hit the vape, they got high, but they also got very sick. All of them had to go to the hospital. They were all fine, but you can imagine Gasoline's not going to be good for you. We also have fentanyl now starting to show up in vapes, right? Because fentanyl is a powder. You can put it in almost anything. You can crush up a pill and put it in there. And a lot of the pills these days have some level of fentanyl in them. So lots of bad things happen. What can parents do? You got to talk with your kids. You've got to spend some time with your kids, right? You got to get them off the devices. Make sure they don't have devices in their bedrooms at night, but talk to your kids about vaping all the time. Check their backpacks, check their cars, right? And here's a trick that I learned a long time ago. When I ask kids if they're vaping, I'll say, hey, are you vaping? And if it's anything but an absolute no in like half a second, it's a yes. So, hey, are you vaping? Well, why would you ask me that? That's a yes. Hey, are you vaping? Well, who told you I was vaping? That's a yes. Hey, are you vaping? What? You don't trust me? That's a yes. Right? And it goes the same for a lot of other things. But with the vape question, I get kids almost every time. Hey, are you vaping? If it's not an immediate no, it's a yes. And so then we go from there. Hey, look, I think you are vaping. Let's talk about it. Again, when they ask me, why should I not vape, right? We don't have enough information on vaping dangers for kids. We don't have the guy with talking with the commercial that, hey, you know, I lost my vocal cords. We don't have that stuff yet. So even parents, when I tell a lot of parents, hey, your kid's vaping, a lot of parents don't even think it's a big deal. It's like, no, it is a big deal, right? This is going to affect their whole life. And what I tell kids, the 3 biggest decisions they're ever going to make in their entire life, number 1, drugs, alcohol, tobacco. You pick that, your 40-year-old self is going to know it. Number 2 is your education. Whatever you pick for education, your 40-year-old self is going to know it. Number 3 is who and when you have sex. Those 3 things are going to be the biggest impact on your 40-year-old self that you're ever going to have. And you make those choices right here in middle school and high school. But vaping is such an easy one to get into, and they're so flavored nicely that it's so hard for kids to beat. It's so hard. And I see middle school kids who are into all kinds of things. As soon as they start vaping, no more vaping. The other thing I tell the kids is, look, I arrest crackheads. I arrest people who are heroin addicts. I've never had a crackhead who said I went from 0 to crack. They're usually going to start with cigarettes. They're going to start with vaping. They're going to start with marijuana. And even marijuana is started usually with vaping or cigarettes, but then they move to marijuana very quickly. But those 3 are pretty interchangeable. Marijuana, alcohol, and vaping are going to be interchangeable. As soon as you do one, then you can justify the others. Then you're out of vape juice at 3 in the morning. Okay, let me take a pill. Let me take something harder, right? And the dabs that we were talking about earlier, marijuana joint these days have about 20% THC. In the 70s, they were about 60% THC. Now you can boil it down with help of YouTube and get 80% THC, 90% THC. So it's really playing a trick on kids, on their minds, and changing everything about everything with kids. All right, I think that should be most of it. Now, the other thing I'm seeing is kids are going into seizures. So if they don't eat and they don't get a good night's sleep and they take a hit of a 50 milligram vape in the morning, they will sit on the ground and start flopping like a fish, have extensive sweating, and just they'll flop around. And even that does not stop them. They'll be vaping the next day because they are so addicted. All right, I think that's scary enough for vapes for now.
Thank you. I was shocked to learn that they're making vapes look like highlighters. They have hoodies that the string is a vape, like just so easy for kids to just hide them, and teachers and parents have no idea. Scary. Thank you so much to the wonderful experts that shared today. I hope that everyone, the attendees will return for the remaining 2. Like I said, we'll hear some stories. And I think there's nobody better to hear from than kids telling you what you could do to help them, not vape or not start vaping. So we're going to hear from some of them on the next one. And then, like I said, we'll have resources. I will stick around if anybody has any questions, but that's all we have for you tonight. Let me just remind you, if you want to take this for professional development credit, we will send a link tomorrow for you to be able to register through the respective universities that you would like to do your professional development credit for. And so look for that coming tomorrow. And then it's not too late for your colleagues to sign up. So if you go back and say, oh my gosh, this was a great thing, you need to come, they can still register. The information is still on our website. They can watch the recording and catch up before the next webinar in February. So please spread the word that we're still doing this and that they can still attend if they would like to. And so with that, we will sign off for tonight. Thank you all for attending. Thank you again to these great speakers for taking the time to come and share what are some scary facts, but also necessary for all of us to hear.